Hey guys, welcome to DOPAMANIA. By the end of this video, you would have covered 20% of your 12 cranial nerves so that you need not mug up your textbooks before exam. So watch till the end. In this video, we'll be studying about the functional components and nuclei of the cranial nerves. Here's the outline for this video. In first part, we'll be discussing functional components in the following points, and in the second part, the nuclei of the cranial nerves. To understand the functional components, first we need to study the development of the central nervous system in brief. As we all know, almost whole of the nervous system is derived from ectoderm. During embryonic stage, there is formation of a structure called as neural tube that later forms the brain and spinal cord. The wall of neural tube is made up of three layers: inner ependymal, middle mantle which forms the grey matter, and outer marginal which forms the white matter. Soon, mantle differentiates into dorsal alar lamina and ventral basal lamina. This division is of considerable functional importance as alar lamina develops into structures that are sensory in function and basal lamina into those that are motor. Let's understand how the neural tube develops into spinal cord and brainstem respectively. As you can see in the diagram, alar part in spinal cord highlighted in red and basal part in blue. For brainstem, notice the roof plate area in neural tube. During development of brainstem, there is stretching of this roof plate by pontine flexure, as a result of which the alar lamina assumes a lateral position in red and basal lamina assumes a medial position in blue. Let's compare between brainstem and spinal cord. Alar lamina is lateral in brainstem and dorsal in spinal cord, whereas basal lamina is medial in brainstem and ventral in spinal cord. So in brainstem, they are mediolateral in position, and in spinal cord, they are dorsoventral in position. What is sensory and motor, or afferent and efferent? Functional components are divided into sensory or afferent and motor or efferent. Afferent is the sensory input. Information is sent towards the CNS. Whereas efferent is the motor output. Information is sent away from the CNS. They are further divided into somatic and visceral. Somatic is to the skeletal muscles. Visceral is to the smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and glands. Somatic and visceral are further divided into general and special, except the somatic efferent, which only has a general part. You need to remember these three terms: what is general, what is special, and what is special visceral efferent. General are those components that are carried by cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Special are those components that are carried by cranial nerves only. You can remember this in an easy way. Our brain is special, so the cranial nerves that arise from our brain are carried by special components. Special visceral efferent is to the striated muscles derived from the branchial arches. Thus, there are a total of 7 functional components: general somatic afferent, special somatic afferent, general visceral afferent, special visceral afferent, general somatic efferent, general visceral efferent, and special visceral efferent. To make it easy for you to understand the functions of these 7 functional components, here's an example. Functional component responsible for carrying taste sensations from anterior 2/3 of the tongue to the brain will be special somatic afferent. Special as it is carried by cranial nerve, somatic as tongue is made up of skeletal muscles, and afferent as sensations are carried towards the CNS. Now coming back to the flowchart. General somatic afferent transmits sensory information like pain, temperature, touch, and proprioception. Cranial nerves associated are 5, 7, 9, and 10. Special somatic afferent transmits special sensory information like hearing, balance, and vision. Cranial nerves associated is the 8th cranial nerve. General visceral afferent transmit visceral sensory data like information obtained by receptors present in heart, lungs, GIT, carotid body, and carotid sinus. Cranial nerves associated are 9 and 10. Special visceral afferent transmits special sensory information like smell, taste, vision, hearing, and equilibrium. Cranial nerves associated are 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, and 10. General somatic efferent carry information related to skeletal muscles like extraocular and tongue muscles. Cranial nerves associated are 3, 4, 6, and 12. General visceral efferent innervate involuntary smooth muscles and glands via the parasympathetic fibers. Cranial nerves associated are 3, 7, 9, and 10. Special visceral efferent innervate skeletal muscles derived from the branchial arches. Cranial nerves associated are 5, 7, 9, and 10. What are the functional components present in brain and spinal cord? Functional components of spinal cord are general somatic afferent, general visceral afferent, general visceral efferent, and general somatic efferent. Functional components of brainstem, apart from these four, include three special columns: special somatic afferent, special visceral afferent, and special visceral efferent. Remember that alar lamina forms sensory column and basal lamina forms motor columns. So there are 4 functional components in spinal cord and 7 functional components in brainstem. Coming to the second part of the video. What are nuclei? Nuclei are collection of cell bodies in the central nervous system. Remember that the nuclei of cranial nerves are located in the brainstem. 4 cranial nerves originate from midbrain, 4 from pons, and 4 from the medulla oblongata. And all these cranial nerves have their nuclei in these respective parts, except cranial nerves 1 and 2, which do not have their nuclei in brain. Cranial nerves 1 to 4 originate from midbrain, 5 to 8 originate from pons, 9, 10, and 12 originate from medulla oblongata, and 11 originates from the spino-medullary junction. Here's the melody to remember the impulses carried by the cranial nerves. Sensory, sensory, motor, motor, mixed, sensory, mixed, mixed, motor, motor. Cranial nerves 1 and 2 do not have any nucleus. Cranial nerve 3 has 2 nuclei, one motor and one parasympathetic, called the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Cranial nerve 4 has 1 nucleus. Cranial nerve 5 has 4 nuclei, 1 motor nucleus and 3 sensory nuclei, mesencephalic, main sensory, and spinal nucleus. Cranial nerve 6 has 1 nucleus called the abducent nucleus. Cranial nerve 7 has 3 nuclei, 1 sensory, 1 motor, and 1 parasympathetic. Sensory nucleus is the nucleus of tractus solitarius. Parasympathetic nucleus consists of lacrimatory and superior salivatory nucleus and the motor nucleus. Nucleus of tractus solitarius is the special sensory nucleus and has 3 parts, one each for cranial nerve 7, 9, and 10. Note that the nucleus of tractus solitarius is present between pons and medulla. So cranial nerve 7, which originates from pons, and cranial nerve 9 and 10 originates from medulla oblongata, as seen earlier. The parasympathetic nucleus is also a nucleus of cranial nerves 7, 9, and 10, and it has 4 parts: lacrimatory nucleus, superior salivatory nucleus, inferior salivatory nucleus, and the dorsal vagal nucleus. Note that the parasympathetic nucleus is also present between pons and medulla. The lacrimatory and superior salivatory nucleus are present in pons and hence are nuclei of cranial nerve 7. Inferior salivatory nucleus, located just below pons in medulla, is nuclei of cranial nerve 9, and the dorsal vagal nucleus present in medulla is nuclei of cranial nerve 10. Cranial nerve 8 has 6 nuclei. They are divided into 2 components, vestibular and cochlear. Vestibular component has 4 nuclei: superior vestibular, spinal vestibular, medial vestibular, and lateral vestibular. Cochlear component has 2 nuclei, dorsal cochlear and ventral cochlear. Cranial nerve 9 has 3 nuclei: nucleus of tractus solitarius, which is sensory, nucleus ambiguus, which is motor, and inferior salivatory nucleus, which is parasympathetic. Cranial nerve 10 has 3 nuclei: nucleus of tractus solitarius, which is sensory, nucleus ambiguus, which is motor, and dorsal vagal nucleus, which is parasympathetic. Recall that the cranial nerve 11 arises from the spino-medullary junction, so it has two components: spinal cervical component and cranial component. The cranial component has one nucleus called nucleus ambiguus. Cranial nerve 12 has one nucleus called nucleus of hypoglossal nerve. To summarize, cranial nerves 1 and 2 do not have any nucleus. Cranial nerve 3 has 2 nuclei, cranial nerve 4 has 1 nucleus, cranial nerve 5 has 4 nuclei, cranial nerve 6 has 1 nucleus, cranial nerve 7 has 3 nuclei, cranial nerve 8 has 6 nucleus, cranial nerve 9 has 3 nuclei, cranial nerve 10 has 3 nuclei, cranial nerve 11 has 1 nucleus, and cranial nerve 12 has 1 nucleus. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.